Good evening and welcome to Rural America Live. I'm Christina Loren. Over the past 5 decades, the World Dairy Expo has been the premier meeting place for the global dairy industry, boasting the world's largest dairy-focused trade show and North America's top-tier dairy cattle show. In a normal year, the highly anticipated gathering in Madison, Wisconsin also hosts a number of seminars and youth contests, drawing crowds of over 65,000 annually from nearly 100 countries. Now, unfortunately, the global event was canceled because of the pandemic. So tonight, key dairy and food leaders are here for a discussion. We're going to talk about consumer insights in a COVID-19 world, an essential part of the show's educational program coming directly to you tonight. And later, we'll open up our phone lines and bring you in on the conversation. But first, let's meet our panel of experts. World Dairy Expo and Dairy Management, Inc. have teamed up, and joining us live tonight, Barb O'Brien, President of Dairy Management, Inc. We also welcome Eve Pollitt, Senior Vice President of Strategic Intelligence, and Paul Zimnisky, Executive Vice President of Global Innovation Partnerships. Thank you all for joining us. Let's start with a little bit of background on each of you. Barb?
Oh, good evening, Christina, and thanks so much for having us here. As Christina said, I'm Barbara O'Brien, and I serve as the president of DMI, which makes me responsible for really the planning and implementation of the domestic dairy checkoff program. And that includes oversight of our science program, strategic intelligence and consumer insights capabilities, innovation and sales strategies, which is really about the work we do with food service partners and retailers, focus on reputation and marketing communications. I also have the privilege of serving as the president of the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, and that is a forum that was founded by farmers through the checkoff and brings leaders from across the dairy value chain. They come together to work on topics of shared values and interest in the areas of sustainability and social responsibility that, when we address those topics together, ultimately allows us to positively position U.S. dairy as a whole.
Really looking forward to unpacking what's happening in the dairy industry right now and the resiliency of the industry as a whole tonight. Eve, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, Christina. I'm a Senior Vice President of Strategic Intelligence, which is our Consumer and Market Insights group at DMI. And I have a specific focus on future casting and strategic foresight, which is a practice that looks at all of the trends and signals that will have an impact on consumers and businesses now and in the future.
All right. And so you're going to give us a little bit of insight into this next generation and how we can do a better job of reaching younger consumers with the great dairy story that we have to tell. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Christina. First, I want to say hello to all the farmers. I grew up in central Illinois, between Danville and Hoopeston, the corn jerkers. So proud to be here. I lead our domestic sales efforts with and through the food service arena, with the fluid milk revitalization efforts and our new sales growth platforms. When COVID hit, I also assumed responsibilities to look at new channels and really optimize channels such as the school channel and the hunger channel to make sure that we're meeting the needs there.
All right. We have so much to talk about. Let's dive right into tonight's discussion. Barb, for those who may be unfamiliar with Dairy Management, Inc., tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
So DMI, or Dairy Management, Inc., is the National Dairy Checkoff Program. And we work on behalf of America's 35,000 dairy farm families. Our goal since our inception has been to build trust in dairy and in dairy farmers and to drive demand and sales. I think it's important to recognize that the checkoff was created by farmers as a self-help program that assures that once milk leaves the farm gate, farmers have a voice in how their products are marketed and positioned to the end consumer. The checkoff need was identified many years ago. It was at a time when per capita consumption was actually dropping significantly. And this was in a period during the 1950s through the 1970s. By 1983, the government was storing 17 billion pounds of product, which certainly wasn't good for farmers and frankly was costing USDA millions of dollars in product purchases and in warehousing costs. So it was in that year, 1983, that the checkoff was formed. And since then, demand or commercial disappearance of dairy products has gone straight up. There's a chart that, Christine, I hope you're able to share with the audience. It shows production growth since that year is up 83 billion pounds. And the checkoff program has helped not just keep pace, but has helped commercial use of dairy products, in fact, exceed production over that period of time. So very proud of those results and very proud of our promise to farmers to continue to find a home for their growing production.
You know, it's such a great product. Calcium is such an important building block for healthy growth. And I really, really love that we're doing this show to talk a little bit more about dairy in general tonight. We got to look back, though, because it wasn't too long ago when we saw our farmers having to dump milk. Let's talk about some of the primary obstacles that the dairy industry has faced since the pandemic started.
You know, I'll answer that question, Christine, if I may, and I know others can jump in. You know, like many business sectors, dairy experienced numerous challenges, including supply chain issues that affected both our commercial markets as well as non-commercial channels. Normally reliable markets or destinations for our dairy products, like restaurants or schools, I think we all saw it. They suddenly shut down. It was like an overnight turnoff. You know, and it's important to know 50% of dairy products, particularly cheese and butter, moves through the food service or the restaurant channel. At the same time, families were told to shelter at home, which resulted in a surge in home-cooked meals and greater demand at retail. So processing plants, milk, cheese, yogurt, powder plants, were running at full capacity. And as we all know, one more dynamic with businesses shuttered and growing unemployment, we also saw a growing hunger crisis. If you can imagine a 70% increase in demand at food banks and pantries, and 40% of those people turning to food banks were first-time users.
It's so hard to see the pictures. We're still seeing the lines outside of food banks. We know how important dairy is to these food banks as well. Eve, let's bring you into the conversation as we start to think about the compounding impact of the pandemic on our nation's farmers. It's also important to consider how consumers have been impacted because the farmers feed them and they in turn feed the farmers. To help us better understand that side of the equation, what are some of the key observations that you have noticed about consumer behavior during the pandemic?
Yeah, well, first is home is the new hub. Home is now our restaurant, our movie theater, our schools, our offices, you know, our retail stores, you name it. And the notion of home is changing now that everyone was forced inside and online. So because of this, we're seeing new consumption and new types of behaviors. And we're actually seeing the resurgence of the family meal come back and mealtime. The second is consumers, given this is a pandemic, are super concerned about their health and the health of their families. So they're eating functional foods, which are essentially foods that have a specific function, that have nutrition plus in them, that help you to achieve different health benefits you desire, whether it's foods that boost your immunity, foods that help you sleep, foods that give you energy and more. So we also saw on the flip side, an increase in functional indulgence, which is the same thing. So we've been seeing a lot of jokes online about the quarantine 15 and people gaining weight during this time because of this new focus around mealtime and the fun that baking and cooking can really bring during this time. And the third I would mention is that A lot of consumers are super interested in buying locally and buying direct from their producers. They want to support their local community. They've seen some supply chain issues, and they believe that is a way that they can give back. So we're seeing really a resurgence of local buying during this time.
Which is great for the local communities that are really getting that help right now. Eve, talk about how brands and companies are adapting on the fly now to meet these new consumer mindsets and lifestyle changes. People have to stay limber right now.
Yeah, so first, when you talk about home as the new hub, there's a recognition that home is now a gaming center and an entertainment center. So we're seeing some companies also recognize that home is now the new camp for kids. So Walmart launched this summer Camp Walmart, which was essentially a virtual program that involved celebrities who acted as camp counselors and taught different camp classes, whether it was arts and crafts or fitness classes. So this really helped parents who had kids at home who weren't expecting to be home deal with the loss of camp. And then second, we've seen companies like Nintendo, Animal Crossing partner with Hellmann's mayonnaise to create a special feature in game where gamers and those young gamers can go to Hellman's Island, drop off their food waste in the game Animal Crossing, and that actually donates meals to real families who are experiencing hunger in the United States. Second, when you talk about functional foods, we're seeing a lot of brands talk about their immunity benefits and come out with immunity boosting products during this time. And last, we've seen this resurgence in local buying, and we've seen farmers markets go online. So one great example of this is a company called Local Maverick that's based in Burlington, Vermont. And the founder actually worked in marketing, and he saw the impact on the local community. He quit his job and he founded this company that is the future of farmers markets and allows these local producers to sell their products online and connects them to local consumers in the area. So we're seeing an influx of these entrepreneurial ideas that fit these new COVID consumer needs.
That's fantastic. I think the more that consumers get a chance to see where their food comes from, they get to meet the farmers, it really develops that relationship that seems to be lacking. We seem to be getting further and further away from the farm as consumers. Now, Paul, let's bring you into the conversation as a lead who works directly with checkoff partners like McDonald's, Domino's, Taco Bell, and even Pizza Hut. How has their business fared during the pandemic?
When the pandemic hit, it was immediately disrupted in really three ways. You think about McDonald's, Taco Bell, they do 25 to 35% of their business dine-in. That completely evaporated. Second, delivery. When you think about the pizza guys, they have a high contact business, getting pizza delivered to your house, answering the door, and we were still learning how COVID was, contacted, so that business was affected. And then third, as consumers stayed home, they started to really shift from, in ways they order and interact with the food service industry, and they started using digital applications, using their phone apps and things like that to contact with the consumer. And it was just we think about the technology space and the data space, aggressive push in that environment to orders and to distribute and communicate, and it's just astounding pressure on the industry.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but you know what? The checkoff was standing ready, and the checkoff got involved so quickly. Talk about how the dairy checkoff did get involved to curb that sudden shock to demand at some of these restaurant partners you have.
The first thing we did with the partners is engage them in the hunger situation. As 17 million people were added to the unemployment rolls, they all raised their hand and participated and got involved with the Feeding Americas and the local hunger efforts by donating food. So we worked with them to do that. And then we started focusing immediately on the sales. As you mentioned, and Barb talked about, 50% of key items like cheese and butter go through the food service. So we knew we needed to work with this industry to immediately help solve the need and create demand. And so we created demand in three ways. One, If you just add up those big four players, Domino's, Taco Bell, McDonald's, and Pizza Hut, they have 80 million users of their applications, on the phones. And so we activated digital promotions to talk about the power of dairy, to tell the farmer story, and to drive awareness and usage. Whether it's McDonald's and McCafe, on a Taco Bell perspective, we have two scientists embedded, and we have scientists embedded at several partnerships. But at Taco Bell, we started creating new meal occasions, created meal kits for people to make meals at home using Taco Bell. We created, I'll call it cravings packs, almost family-sized packs versus the typical $5 box. We also enacted new types of partnerships. With Pizza Hut, we brought in Jimmy Fallon. I'm sure the farmer families were affected. Where the graduations were thrown out of, people weren't able to have great celebrations with their families. Graduations were canceled. And so with Jimmy Fallon, we gave away 500,000 pizzas with Pizza Hut and to graduating seniors. And he celebrated and talked about how great the dairy farmers were at being part of the promotion. And one of the key things at driving sales, more than 40% of the people who engaged with the promotion had never used the Pizza Hut app. So it's just creating new users in the dairy industry. And the average pizza moves a lot of volume. And another way we did is we immediately worked with Domino's. We'd actually piloted a year ago non-contact carry out. And we always, with these partners, are looking at new technology to make sure dairy's front and center against other competitors in the digital space. And so we were ready when COVID hit. Domino's immediately flipped, and you still see the commercials today where they talk about car-side delivery. You pull up through your app, they know you're there, you pop your trunk, and they put it in your trunk. You didn't have to talk or say anything to anybody. So those type of programs and promotions immediately drove sales. If you look at those four QSRs, they're significantly outpacing the other food service players. Domino's through mid-year is 14% growth.
Wow.
And the rest of the industry is struggling. So it just shows that that we moved a lot of volume to help maintain the milk and supply in the U.S.
That's it. You're helping drive their sales while you're helping simultaneously the farmers in this country. So that has to feel pretty good. You built that bridge. Joining us now by phone from Pennsylvania is Marilyn Hersey. Marilyn, you also serve as a chair of Dairy Management, Inc., but you're a dairy farmer. How would you summarize your experience so far in 2020?
Thank you, Christina, for having me. This was such an unprecedented time. No one could have prepared for this. No one anticipated this. I don't know that anything has ever come close to this ever. But as our cows never stop milking, so. When this happened, as farmers, we had to navigate through a lot, and we had to navigate through as plants were shutting down, with workers getting sick. We had to navigate with restaurants shutting down, and stores were limiting sales, which added to our frustration. There was plenty of milk in storage, and our cows were still milking. But people were buying in hordes, and stores kind of panicked too. But we saw something very positive, which was a renewed appreciation for farmers, for us. People started understanding the value of where their food comes from, and having grocery stores filled with that food that starts on our farms. And we were still doing that. We were still farming as we have always done for generations, but it seemed to really spark a new appreciation for us as farmers.
Yeah, especially at the grocery stores. We all thought that it was a scarcity issue at first, and so I think a lot of people really did realize how important it is to have that milk in their refrigerator and that cheese as well. Marilyn, talk about some of the ways that the Dairy Checkoff stepped in to help farmers get through this.
So the Dairy Checkoff teams, both local and nationally, just did an instant pivot. It was just instantly. We pivoted the plan that we had in place for the next months. It was no longer the plan that we were using, and so it all of a sudden it became, for this next whole year, it became how we can adapt this plan and an entirely new challenge and be in the moment. And, our relationships were really foundational in this. And we had a relationship with Feeding America. We saw food banks as an avenue. They needed us to help feed a growing population of hungry Americans, and we needed them as a source of our production, so where our milk could go. We also leaned on our partners, and they delivered for us. We have value in having years of that relationship developed, and our partners really came through, and you know, that relationship is so critical. The checkoff really worked hard as well, came together locally and nationally with retailers, as we talked about before, with signage being put up and limiting gallons of milk. We worked with retailers to remove the purchase limit signs from the dairy case, and farmers got involved with that. I got phone calls, texts from farmers, and we would put them in contact with the local state and region, and they would help us get the signage to be taken down.
We're so grateful for you coming on and sharing your experience with us, Marilyn. We're going to pause for a quick break, but stay with us. You are such an important part of the show, and we want to hear from you tonight. What questions do you have for our panel of dairy experts? Maybe you're someone who has had to change the way that you eat because of the pandemic, the way that you're consuming dairy. Let us know. Our phone lines are open. The number is 877-731-6733. Stay with us. More Rural America Live with the World Dairy Expo and Dairy Management, Inc. right after this. Welcome back to Rural America Live. I'm Christina Loren. Tonight, we are focused on changing consumer trends in a COVID-19 world with an emphasis on the dairy industry. And we want to hear from you tonight. Call in with your questions for our panel of experts with Dairy Management, Inc., or let us know how the pandemic has altered your buying habits in the dairy aisle. Join the conversation, 877-731-6733. You are a critical part of the show, and you have valuable insight for the dairy industry that only you can help us with. Again, that number, 877-731-6733. Barb, let's pick that conversation back up with you. We know that food insecurity is a global issue, but COVID-19 has put a magnifying glass on just how many people are struggling with hunger right now. Talk about the commitment from dairy farmers to fight food insecurity, including Gen Youth's work and DMI's partnership with Feeding America.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about that. And, you know, I have to say, based on working for dairy farmers for as many years as I have, you know, this is exactly why farmers do what they do, to feed people. And I think that's particularly been critical as we've seen so many fall into that food insecurity area. You know, and we're talking about kids at schools, as well as families who are now, you know, leaning in and needing the food banks. So Feeding America is a longtime partner of DMI. We actually started working with them in 2012. And we went in at a time when we felt we could bring our nutrition expertise. We have a staff nationally and locally of over 100 dietitians. And we, along with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, stepped in first to help Feeding America educate their clients on the importance of nutrient-rich food, and then to work with them in looking at their procurement of products, and importantly, nutrient-rich products like dairy and other healthy foods. So with the pandemic, you know, we worked intensely, as Paul said. We shifted our focus quickly. Job number one was to move product to market. So we worked along with USDA, with MilkPEP, which is the processor checkoff program, and many dairy companies across the country. In this last year, about 465 million pounds of dairy were donated to Feeding America. During the early stages of the pandemic, our checkoff state, particularly at the state and regional level, I mean, that's where things really happen. They stepped in and worked with pantries and food banks across the country to quantify, to really understand what the demand was for milk in those local food banks. So we quickly connected those food banks with co-ops who had excess supply and processors, Kroger, DFA, many others. And the result was amazing. Hundreds of thousands of gallons of milk moving into those pantries and food banks, along with hundreds of thousands of pounds of cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, sour cream, all being processed specifically for the Feeding America system. It was an amazing feat, Christina, and something I think we can all be proud of for families in need.
Absolutely. You were up against the clock. I mean, when you're working with perishable goods, you have a time clock that is always ticking. So it's amazing that you were able to do that. Joining us now by phone is Gerard Matthews, Director of the Dairy Supply Chain for Feeding America. Now, Gerard, you've had quite a year to contend with. What can you share about the needs for milk and other high-demand foods for organizations like Feeding America right now?
Yes. Hello, Christina, and thanks again for having me. But before I get into the COVID-19 conversation, I'd like to just take a step back and share a little background about who we are for your audience this evening. And so, we're Feeding America, better known, we call it FANO, Feeding America's national office. We have an office in Chicago and also one in D.C. with our corporate relations and government relations team. That kind of work with us in lobbying and all those good things around Farm Bill and SNAP programs. But we're an organization of 200 food banks across the country with 60,000 agencies that consist of feeding programs like your local food pantries, your mobile distribution program, after-school programs, and a gamut of other feeding programs that our food banks and agencies distribute throughout the country. We're networked to services every zip code and every county in the U.S., including Puerto Rico. But during even more normal times, we typically have about 2 million volunteers annually that support our food banks in a number of different capacities. Those food banks rely heavily on our support, on those volunteer support to really execute and distribute the billions of pounds each year that we distribute to the 40 million people we serve. In terms of the COVID-19 impact and response, just wow. This has caused Feeding America Network to really experience such unprecedented times during a perfect storm, what we say, and it's not necessarily a good perfect storm. Obviously, experiencing the pandemic, increased demand, the disruption in the food supply, which you heard a little bit about earlier, and then also, which most people aren't aware, we had a tremendous decrease in volunteers, those 2 million volunteers I talked about a little earlier. We're experiencing significant spikes in demand, disruptions in that food supply, who we typically and normally work with closely day to day to reach people with resources when they need it most. So we're really having to pivot, not only internally at our national office, but also within our network as we figure out how to source and distribute resources to make the most impact for those in need. At Feeding America, facing hunger is really more than just simply providing food. It's about providing wellness, nourishment, and strength. It's about helping those not only survive, but also to thrive on their journeys to stability. That's why our mission to provide the most nutritious food possible, like the fresh milk and other perishable products to improve people's health and well-being, is very, very important. We know our food banks say they don't receive enough milk to meet the demand. And the number one reason for that is inadequate milk donations and refrigeration capacity at our food banks and agencies. We know that milk is one of the most requested food items, but least donated to our food bank clients. So before the pandemic began, millions of people in the U.S. struggle with hunger, as we know. And food insecurity in the U.S. was at its lowest since the Great Depression. But obviously, today is quite a different story. Feeding America estimates that as a result of the pandemic, that the number will rise to about 54 million people, including 18 million children, and that's about 1 in 4 that will be impacted in the year 2020.
Wow.
So, yeah, we've seen many first-time users, as you heard before, first-time users visiting our food banks and agency distributions, and well over double the demand for our food banks during this crisis. So simply stated, these are extraordinary times in the charitable food system space.
I can't believe that. I mean, just to hear you say that you were serving 40 million and now 54 million is the new number. Gerard, based on the longtime partnership between Feeding America and the Dairy Checkoff, describe the significance of your relationship with DMI, not just now, but over the years, and the fact that you had built that relationship going into the pandemic. How did that set you up?
Yeah, as Barb mentioned a little earlier, our partnership has evolved over the past 8 years, and it has become increasingly important to our food banks and mostly important to the clients we serve. Earlier in the partnership, the DMI Feeding America partnership was really focused more about the importance of nutrition education, which we still are, but we've learned that in addition to that, building access for fresh dairy has also become increasingly important for our food banks and those most in need. Before the partnership evolved, our network had very limited fresh milk access, or fresh dairy in general, because of a number of different challenges, obviously, in the supply chain with distributing and sourcing fresh, perishable product. We had challenges getting it where it was needed most, which is our food banks and those food insecure communities across the country. But when the partnership somewhat pivoted to focus on access to milk and other fresh dairy products back in 2012, Feeding America's annual distribution was about 173 million pounds and has grown significantly every year because of this partnership. So today, I think you heard Barb mention earlier that our annual distribution now for dairy has reached a total of 465 million pounds, which is quite an impact for those we serve across the country. I would tell you our clients have been most appreciative of the milk and fresh dairy that they've been able to receive. Quick story, Christina. I was visiting a school, not necessarily a school, but a milk distribution at one of our agencies. And that distribution manager came over to thank me for the opportunity that we're providing milk so that they can distribute to their community. But really what was most important about the story she shared with me was she said that a mom came up to her and so appreciative, almost in tears, to thank her for the opportunity to take a gallon of milk home to her family because her daughter called her a hero to be able to do that. So that's the big part of the success. We have to contribute that success to the growing partnerships that we've made, not only at DMI and Feeding America at the national level, but with many different processors and dairy companies, both nationally and at the local levels, like the state and regionals you heard, those checkout program organizations that work directly in our food banks in those communities that we serve. And for me, Christina, a unique experience that I've been able to experience with the DMI partnership and grow with the partnership was I've had the opportunity to visit and spend some time with farmers across the country to really better understand the work that they do on a daily basis and what's important to them as they continue to grow and produce the products most needed by our network and our clients we serve. I'm often asked about our DMI partnership because of how the progress and the evolution of it. And I often tell people it's not just a partnership with one company or an organization, but it's a partnership that has built an alliance with an industry, all working together to make collective impact for dairy access to the food insecure communities across the country. Yeah. We've made significant impacts since 2012 to support our neighbors facing hunger, and we're moving more milk and dairy products than ever before for our nation's dairy farm families. So
that's beautiful.
Thanks again for this opportunity to join you tonight.
Hey, thank you. And you know what I love about this story is that you had sown the seeds early. You had developed this partnership early on. And so by the time the storm hit, that root was already deep in the ground, and so you were ready. I love hearing stories like that. Thank you, Gerard. Thank you for calling in, and thank you for the work that you do to feed our fellow countrymen and the children out there who are hungry at Feeding America. With the mounting impact of food insecurity, it really became evident when schools closed, underscoring their important role in providing food to some of our nation's hungriest children. Paul, Gen Youth is an organization founded by dairy farmers, and they were able to offer some relief through a special fund. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's just building off the farmers' hearts, and I think Gen Youth is another organization that we have where one of the core missions is to make sure kids have access to healthy, nutritious food. And so when COVID hit, Gen Youth we knew kids were going to be disrupted in their school environment, so they surveyed the school nutrition directors saying, what can the industry do to help? And what they learned real quickly is, equipment to enable kids to have access to healthy, nutritious, fresh, cold food, and to safely distribute that cold food. And one of the key insights was the amount of investment needed. It was over almost $40 million in that survey. The school districts raised their hands that they could use the help. So Gen Youth immediately went on a fundraising campaign, raised more than $10 million of cash and in-kind dollars to building and buying a safe, PPE. When you think about the cold bags, the meal carts, under this whole disrupted school environment, they rip all over and to help the kids today have easy access, whether it's, they're eating at home with the schooling at home and they're driving through, they've got the carts and bags, to and dining in their classrooms, where they've got coolers that have been provided from Gen Youth and the funds.
I love that. We were just able to show our audience what that looks like as well and where that funding went. Thank you so much for sharing those pictures with us as well. I know someone who understands the impact on schools. It's Donna Martin. She's a registered dietitian. She serves as director of school nutrition for Burke County, Georgia. Joining us now by phone, Donna, talk about some of the challenges that you have faced in making sure that kids continue to receive the meals they rely on from public schools.
Thank you, Christina, so much for having me on. I've been working in school nutrition for over 30 years, and nothing has ever been as challenging as this has been. We have 4,300 students in 5 schools in one of the largest rural counties in Georgia. We also have one of the highest percentages of food insecure children in the country. 100% of our children eat at no cost, and 63% of them are on food stamps. So on March 17th, when the governor of Georgia shut us down, we had to immediately start feeding 4,300 students who were not coming to school. We immediately started rolling out 34 of our school buses to the community with bagged meals for students Monday through Friday. We bagged up breakfast, lunch, and supper for our very food insecure populations. Students were getting every day 3 servings of milk, 3 servings of fresh fruit, 3 servings of fresh vegetables, 2 cartons of juice, a breakfast entree, 1 lunch entree, and a supper entree. We did this for almost 6 months before school started back. We served over 750,000 meals and drove over 125,000 miles on our buses. Then when school started back, we pivoted to having 50% of our children staying home and learning virtually, and 50% were coming back on a hybrid schedule 2 days a week. So my staff then had to cook hot breakfast and lunch Monday through Thursday and send home a bag with breakfast, lunch, and supper to the students who were coming every other day. Then on Friday, my staff had to put together what we call a weekly box for more than 2,000 virtual students that contained 5 breakfasts, 5 lunches, and 5 suppers. We became the Blue Apron of Burke County because the boxes contained ingredients to make meals such as chicken fajitas, macaroni and cheese, smoothies and parfaits. We taught them how to cook cabbage, make tuna noodle casserole, and how to bake a potato. We then added an unusual fruit and vegetable to the box each week in support of the USDA Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant we participate in. So far, our students have gotten things like star fruit, mangoes, dragon fruit, avocados, red bell peppers, a whole pineapple, blood oranges, and we give them instructions on how to cut and eat each item because they don't know how to do that. The parents are raving about the weekly boxes, and as a registered dietitian nutritionist, I think this has been a silver lining to the coronavirus because we are doing some great nutrition education to the families. The parents like that the boxes have healthy food, and they say the kids can't wait to open them to see what's inside because it's like they're getting a Christmas present. We hear that they're eating everything in the box, and nothing has been being wasted. And when I ask them every week what they like the most about the box, they always tell me it's the milk.
Oh, I bet. Milk is the best part of any box, especially if it's chocolate for some kids.
And it is.
I'm sure they're happy about that. You know, talk about what it's like to see some of these kids when they're hungry. A lot of times they don't know why they're not getting the food that they're used to getting. They can't understand what's happening. They're not able to focus on their schoolwork when they're hungry. Talk about some of the repercussions that can happen with this food insecurity.
Well, we know that they are losing academic calendar months. We know that the lag in the summer when kids are not normally fed, that we know that over the summer they can lose 1 to 2 or 3 months of the academic school year. We know that they're irritable. We know that their health deteriorates. We know that their mental health is deteriorating, and we know that they are becoming, they get anemic, they get sick more often, they don't come to school. So we are seeing lots of problems with our kids. So we feel so fortunate in our county that we are really, really able to nourish our children on a daily basis when they're coming to school and then sending the food home, and then on a weekly basis with our lunch boxes and our weekly boxes, because we know the long-term repercussions of this. That you don't see it on a daily basis, but long-term we know that academically they are struggling, emotionally they are struggling, and it's heartbreaking because they do not understand. And so as a dietitian, I tell my staff they all feel so good when they are preparing these meals for these kids. And I tell them, just think about the fact that they're preparing them for their children, their grandchildren, their nieces, their nephews, because it is really hard work. I tell you, carrying these boxes and doing what they're doing is really, really hard work. And they've been doing it nonstop. Other people got a break. My staff has to come to work every day. They're considered essential, and they are there every single day, and they have not gotten a break because the kids are not taking a break from hunger. Hunger does not wait. And
God
it does not
bless
take a summer vacation either.
No, it certainly doesn't. You know, we really, really appreciate the work that you're doing, and your staff for that matter, as you store up your riches in heaven. We know that this is a hard time, but you will be rewarded. Thank you so much. Eve, we want to go back to you. How can we maximize this moment? American consumers seem to have renewed interest right now in dairy and making sure that they can get it. How can we do a better job of sharing dairy's great story with younger generations?
Yeah, I think during this time, dairy's nutrition story has come through loud and clear. I think that people are recognizing that dairy is the original superfood, that dairy is nature's multivitamin. I think another thing that we can do to take advantage of this opportunity with everyone in home and online is to share our sustainability story. Not many people realize the incredible strides that the dairy industry has made in sustainability in the past 10 years, especially younger generations like Gen Z, who care so much about sustainability and who only prefer to purchase products that have a sustainability story and elements behind it. So I think that you will see from us a renewed focus on sharing this story, and you'll see a renewed focus on farmers sharing their own stories, because it's a great one. And we are committing to being net zero by 2050. Dairy brands are committing to be net zero, some of them by 2030. And I think that it's time to really talk about this with consumers and talk about all the changes, the great changes and innovation and strides that have been made.
Absolutely. States like California have made major headway when it comes to dairy cattle and emissions. So this is really great that you're bringing this up. We do have a younger generation out there who needs to know more about agriculture and where their food comes from. On that note, we're going to take a quick break, but our phone lines are open. The number to call is 877-731-6733. More Rural America Live with the World Dairy Expo and Dairy Management, Inc. right after this. Welcome back to Rural America Live with World Dairy Expo and Dairy Management, Inc. Tonight, an important conversation about changing consumer insights in a COVID-19 world. And dairy is front and center of our discussion tonight. You're an important part of the show as well. Join the conversation. How are you buying milk and cheese these days? Does it look different than a year ago? Let us know. Our phone lines are open. The number to call is 877-731-6733. Eve, let's continue our conversation and talk about some of the biggest market and consumer shifts that we have seen since the pandemic started.
Yeah, I think the first one is a widespread recognition between NGOs, consumers, and companies alike that climate change is the next pandemic. And during this time, we've seen environmental health and human health become linked in ways that we didn't expect. A Harvard study came out that linked air pollution to higher rates of death due to COVID. CDC defined the term One Health back in the 2000s that really recognizes the link between environmental and human health. So that is a major shift. And so while many would think that during this time that would be the last focus, it's actually a primary focus for businesses and consumers, especially those younger generations. The second is health as wealth. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic that impacts your health, and consumers are going to have a much greater focus on their health. And we're going to see a lot of focus on preventative eating for health benefits, and a renewed interest in health and wellness that's even more accelerated than it was before the pandemic.
Wow. You know, given those trends that you just pointed out, what do you think that some of the biggest opportunities for dairy are right now?
I think that dairy has an incredible sustainability story. Some of the things that farmers are doing right now in sustainability are incredible. And I think that what dairy can do is involve these younger generations who care so much about sustainability, who care so much about climate change. And I think we need to connect those consumers to the industry, and we need to start listening and learning. And we also need to start telling our story. And when it comes to health as wealth, I think that the dairy industry has an incredible opportunity to develop new and innovative products that meet all of consumers' wellness needs and all of their need states right now, whether it's calm and anxiety to immunity to energy. Dairy's ability to innovate is going to be incredible around this space in the future.
I just love hearing those words come from a young person's mouth. We need more of that. Now, Paul, let's talk about how the pandemic has impacted overall food service sales and what the future might look like as restaurants gradually reopen.
No, from a macro food service, again, we talked about the disruption. You think about fine dining or the limited service places like an Applebee's, it's down 70% or greater. You start to look at the next tier down, we call fast casual, like at the Paneras or Ahmad Pizza, where, again, more dine-in versus drive-through. Those things were down 40 to 50%. And then you get the quick serve arena, the McDonald's, the Wendy's. That category was down greater than 20%. You know, with and through our partners in the activities, our partners significantly outperformed those. And actually, since we started those partnerships, the growth rate has been, we've averaged 3% dairy growth. In an industry, it's growing about 1%. You know, the disruption on food service has just been dramatic. They're saying that 25% of the restaurants will probably close within the next 12 months, you know, and that's in different segments, right? You're going to see an evolution to things called ghost kitchens, as an example, where it's not even a dine-in option. You know, and these ghost kitchens are set up for technology. You know, so you guarantee to get your double cheeseburger hot through new packaging systems and things like that. So investments in ghost kitchens and really warming technology and delivery technology is going to be critical. Pivoting to when you look at the grocery space, then, who's been a big beneficiary of the food service environment. You know, last year, less than 25% of people had ordered their groceries online. Since COVID hit, over 50% are ordering their groceries online. So you're seeing new technology to enable click and collect, click and delivery, new companies come into the space like Grubhub or Uber Eats. And then, you know, the big player that you have to watch for is Amazon. Just as they've taken over other categories, they have a great interest in entering the food space. You know, they first bought Whole Foods in 2017. You know, more recently, Amazon has launched 2 new vehicles, Amazon Go, Amazon Fresh, and I encourage you to look those up. You know, Go is a cashierless system. You know, Fresh is technology driven, and really enabling different ways to get your groceries. And so, as we look and partner, and the good news is we want to make sure dairy's front and center in these emerging
we love Prime
and these
Now.
emerging technology spaces.
Absolutely. Prime Now, you can get your groceries delivered in 2 hours if you live in one of the areas where it's feasible. All right, Barb, we're going to start to wrap the program up. I know that you definitely have many comments to add to what has been said tonight, so let's try to get everything in. I'll let you put a bow around the show. When you take a look at everything that's happened in 2020, you take a look at the long and the short run economics. What do you envision for the future of the dairy industry?
Wow, what a question. I would say in the short term, I think we're all going to continue to deal with uncertainty. But as both Paul and Eve indicated, I personally think there's enormous opportunity for dairy and for dairy farmers, both from a wellness standpoint and from an environmental standpoint. We need to continue to meet people's evolving lifestyles and needs, and it's happening before our eyes, right? I mean, as we see families continue to evolve and adjust to the changes in their lives. Innovation is key, both in the food we serve as well as what's happening on the farm, and it's certainly not a one size fits all on farm. We absolutely know that what's accomplishable varies depending on geography, on size, on technology access, all those things. But the category, we as a category know that people are looking for health and wellness solutions, especially now, and new experiences, flavors, formats, ingredients. We've seen dairy adapt in so many ways these last several months, and we know that's our new reality.
It is. It absolutely is. And you know what? The checkoff has really stepped up and helped out our farmers during this critical time. I'm sure that they're grateful for you. What do you want farmers to know about the recent work that's been carried out by the checkoff on their behalf, Barb?
Thank you for asking that question, Christina. Despite COVID-19 and the life-changing disruptions that we are all feeling, the Dairy Checkoff has never wavered from its mission of building trust in farmers and our products and driving sales. We started this year with a focus, and we are going to finish this year with that same focus and continue to evolve to drive that mission. I'm really thrilled. I'm going to share one last sort of statistic. There's a new report that came out from USDA in the last couple of weeks, and it is telling us that per capita consumption is up for all dairy, up in 2019, another 7 pounds per capita to a new all-time high of 653 pounds per person.
Wow.
And you know what? There's headroom. There's opportunity for more growth if we continue to give people the experiences they want, in their homes, in their diets, meeting their lifestyles. There's nothing but growth.
Well, we sure appreciate the work that you're doing for the nation's hard-working farm families. That brings our conversation to a close for tonight. If you'd like more educational discussions like this, you can visit worlddairyexpo.com. Remember, it's never too early to start making plans for next year. Join the global dairy industry in Madison, Wisconsin, September 28th through October 2nd. That's in 2021 for the World Dairy Expo. Thank you so much for joining us here on Rural America Live. Good night from Rural America's most important network.